Hey, TD, have you seen my... Hello! Guess who's back?
Oh, neat. This is happening again.
I'm never gonna get used to that. Back again. I am back. Tell a friend. Go away. I really didn't want you to come back. Oh, stop. You love our talks. Plus, you haven't used me in a while, and it really hurts my feelings. Why are you even here? Right, are you ever gonna finish this plot thread you started years ago, or are we just gonna keep doing this forever? Well, I was gonna do it when I reviewed a certain game, but I still haven't done that. And I'm not sure I even want to do that. Like I write things and then I don't even. I don't know. It's like I'm a writer of Kingdom Hearts or something. But to be fair, your life hasn't made much sense in years, has it? What are you talking about? Because if you think about it, didn't your life go south right after you had that car accident? You know, when you totaled your first car, you hit a telephone pole. But you walked away from that, miraculously unscathed, even though you hit it at about 40 miles an hour. Right. You know, that's not something most people shrug off, yet you took it like a champ. Or did you? No, I didn't go to the... The worst part is, this is all in your head, none of us would know it. Because we're all a part of it. So I'm just theorizing here. Maybe you've been in a coma, in a hospital, for 7 years. Think about that? No, I don't think about it, ever. Literally, that's the last thing I do.
You know, neither me nor him appeared until that happened.
Okay, both of you need to be silent.
Yeah, we would just be parts of your own subconscious made real, so we would have no idea if this was fake or not.
It has been a weird 7 years.
This could all be an elaborate hallucination, or even death rolls as you slip into the eternal void.
Well, you have a nice day. I'm gonna go... What do I do when I'm not talking to you? Maybe nothing. Because I wouldn't really exist if you weren't actually consciously imagining me in your coma dreams. Coma dreams. Bye. So the worst part is that even if this is just a coma nightmare or something, this game came out before that car accident, so it's real. But Sonic Boom came out after it, so that's not real. And that's something, isn't it?
It makes me question why!
I just, why does Sega insist on hating me? I know it's not personal, but it feels personal. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I'm making it personal. I'm making it personal. Journey of Dreams for the Nintendo Wii. Why? I actually would have rather they just not done this at all. I don't even know where to begin. So, on the surface, you may be looking at this and say, Darkness, it doesn't look that bad. And, okay, I will concede this. It wasn't as bad as I recalled it being. See, when I first played this game after I bought it, like day one, because I was so excited, because I love Nights and Dreams, and like it was finally some kind of sequel, like another game in the series. I was all like, oh my god, it's great! And then I got it home and I played it, and see, this was back when Sega was like, hey, you know all that stuff you liked when you were younger? Yeah, we're gonna ruin all of it. especially Sonic, but also Knights, because that's how we roll now. So again, on the surface, looks fine, and to be fair, again, not as bad as I remember it being. It does have a few good things going for it, so I'm going to take the liberty of giving you all the positive aspects of the game, because it's not like it's Sonic 06 or even Sonic Boom. Like, this game is actually playable, you know, to a certain extent. Like, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just painfully underwhelming. And considering this is a direct sequel to one of the best cult games that Sega ever made, that's not okay. But, again, positives. So, visually, the game is a very mixed bag. When you're actually playing it, it looks alright for the Nintendo Wii. It doesn't look that bad. But then you look at some of the models and the animations, and like once the game does a cutscene, it's like, oh no, just don't, just don't. Just as for the core gameplay mechanics, well, if we ignore the motion controls for 1 second, and I'm sure you're confused, because it's a Wii game and you'd think the motion controls would be a big focus, and logistically, they should be. We're gonna ignore them for now. If you play this game without using the motion controls, it's pretty much the same as you would expect from, you know, a Nights into Dreams style game. Like, Journey of Dreams plays much like Nights into Dreams did. You fly around, you do loops, like, the game plays almost exactly the same. I do think it's a little, and I stress a little, less precise than Into Dreams was, but it's so subtle that I'm not even sure why I'm mentioning it, because once you play it for a bit, you barely notice the difference, and there are times when you play the game, and it's quite enjoyable. Times. Very few of those. But there are times where I will play it, and I'm like, yes, this is actually kind of fun, alright? The music is glorious, and I guess that's to be expected, because if there's one thing Sega is generally, not always, generally consistent with, it's that their musical delivery is always top-notch. And here's no exception. There are some fantastic original tracks and some amazing remasters of the classic Nights in the Dreams soundtrack, so this game is a joy to behold when it comes to the musical score. And I'll also concede that it does follow beat for beat what the original game did right. Overall, the layout is not that different. You have two different stories with two different kids to work with. In this case, it's Will and Helen, each having their own unique set of bosses, with the exception of the final one, which is Wiseman again. And each boss is unique and requires a different strategy in order to beat. So that's actually really great. They also added a few things to the game that I kind of like. Knights does a lot more transformations than he did before, and some of those can actually be controlled by the player. You can turn into a rocket, or a dolphin, or a dragon, because why not? And, you know, that's all alright. And so far, this sounds great, so what's wrong with it? Everything else. Alright, for one, I mentioned the visuals are a mixed bag, but seriously, what the heck? Sometimes, like these textures are sometimes just disgusting, and I know it's the Wii, but the Wii is a slightly better GameCube, okay? And I know I'm not the only one who is willing to say that the GameCube could deliver visuals that didn't look gross. And this game, sometimes, again, it's mixed up. Some textures look really great, like Knights looks pretty good. But then the kids and some of the environments are gross. And, like, this game came out after Sonic and the Secret Ring, so it wasn't like it was a new platform where you didn't know what you were doing. Like, that game looked pretty good. So, what is the matter with you? Oh, and I'm so glad I brought up Secret Rings, because I'm gonna bring this up again. So, I mentioned we're skipping over the motion control issue. That is because, despite this game being a Wii exclusive, and therefore you'd think they would want to adapt the motion controls of the Wii to the classic Knights gameplay, which is a great idea, because the Knights gameplay is remarkably simple in its execution, so you'd think it would translate really well to the motion controls of the Wii. Haha! Oh, no. See, these are awful. Do not play this game with the motion controls. Absolutely, that is the last thing you should even begin to think about. It is not even worth it. They are horrifically bad. It is literally unplayable that way. Now, they obviously gave you every other conceivable option to play the game, because of course they did. You can play it with the GameCube controller or the classic controller or the nunchuck if you choose. And that's what you will choose, because you won't play it with the motion control for longer than maybe 5 minutes before you realize the mistake you have made. And that is all I'm going to say about it. Moving on, this game has voice acting in it, which the original Beyond the Songs didn't have at all. Now, I understand you want to add that to try to expand the story a little bit. And, like, the voice acting isn't bad. It's the writing that makes me want to just shoot myself in the head. I'm going to talk more about the story later, but the very notion that NiGHTS is talking actually bothers me. See, NiGHTS is one of those characters that I don't think should have been permitted to speak. Partially because it leads into the notion that NiGHTS should have a gender, and NiGHTS shouldn't have ever been a confirmed gender. NiGHTS should remain androgynous that way because NiGHTS is supposed to be able to appeal to anybody. That's why in the first game you could play as a boy and a girl. They did the same thing this time, but now NiGHTS talks, so it presents the notion that NiGHTS, he or she himself, has a gender. Now, you might be saying, well, NiGHTS' voice is actually super androgynous in this game, and you're right. However, NiGHTS' sibling, Riala, presents with many male aspects, including the muscular arms and the deeper voice, and like it's pretty clear that Riala's a guy, and I know you might be saying that, oh, did you just assume Riala's gender? And yeah, I did, alright? Because it bothers me, because Riala shouldn't have spoke either. A big part of the charm of the original game was that the story was told in mute, in that a lot of the personality in the characters came out through their animations and the way they display themselves visually, not audibly. And there were aspects of the game that were open to the player's interpretation for how you took in the concept. And somehow, and I don't know how they did this, it's not even the gender thing. The issue I have with this incarnation of NiGHTS is that somehow this NiGHTS has less of a character than the NiGHTS that never spoke at all. And I do not know how you did that. My issue is that NiGHTS doesn't really seem to have much of a character. Like, NiGHTS is just like, oh yeah, we're gonna hang out and we're gonna go have fun. And that's like where the character stops. Like it doesn't progress beyond that. And even when there's a serious notion or issue involving NiGHTS, like NiGHTS being a Nightmaren, and it gets brought up, like the characters don't even really address it. Like it presents a crisis for like 5 minutes, and then the kids are just like, no, it's fine, we trust NiGHTS, and then they never bring it up again. You can't, there's no development on NiGHTS as a character. And if you're gonna make him or her speak, then at the very least, use the opportunity to develop NiGHTS' personality. But you've actually regressed it, because NiGHTS doesn't really do anything that I would have expected out of the NiGHTS that I interpreted from the original game. I mean, he or she doesn't even make funny faces anymore. That never happens in the game. I can't establish there being a character when it comes to NiGHTS. Riala actually has more of a character in this game, but that is only because Riala is established consistently to be a complete moron. And I insist that this is the case. And I will never stop saying that, ever. Riala is an idiot. So the whole thing with Riala is that, again, him and NiGHTS are siblings. And Riala is still loyal to Wiseman, whereas NiGHTS rebel. Alright, that's fine. We already knew that from the first game. So Wiseman is, first of all, the only one with actually creative lines, because Wiseman's just like, I am the Lord of Nightmares and I will drown you in darkness, and it's awesome, I love it. But Riala's whole thing with being loyal to Wiseman is that Wiseman has one request of Riala. He has one job: capture NiGHTS and bring him or her to Wiseman. Riala repeatedly, 6 times, captures NiGHTS in a cage, the same kind of cage, and then immediately decides to not bring him to Wiseman. He just leaves, and the kids just go save NiGHTS. Like, Riala never intervenes. Like, he only attempts to get rid of the kids twice, once in each respective story, and both times he screws it up. Somehow. And even when he does banish them, and they're gone for a considerable amount of time because of the level they were banished to, which I'll talk about in a second, he still leaves knights in the same cage, and the cages always work the same. There are 3 birds, because there are 3 keys to the cage, and the kid has to get in, dual eyes with knights, and knights has to chase down the birds and use the key to unlock the cage, in a very similar gameplay style to the first game. However, in the first game you were chasing down the kid's idea. They call it idea. I don't know how you pronounce it. I'm calling it idea because it's supposed to be a play on the word idea, and they keep calling it idia, and I think it sounds stupid. Whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is, there it made sense because you were trying to get the kid's idea back. See, I just did it. I don't know what I'm talking about. You were trying to get the kid's idea back because you were using the idea to overcome the fact that Knights was sealed in the Idea Shrine, but here it's just a regular cage with keys, and it's like, okay, let's say hypothetically that I believe that Reala decided to lock Knights away, leave and to bring Wiseman to where he left Knights instead of bringing Knights to him, which in my mind would anger Wiseman way more because you're making the man leave his throne to come to where you got Knights, but let's say that's alright. Alright. So you left 3 keys to this thing, so it's fairly secure in my mind, but you want to make sure that the birds carrying these keys stay in the same area as the cage they're supposed to make sure doesn't open. Because that's not how that works. Why doesn't Reala just take one of the keys himself? He never does that either. There are so many ways that he could make this job easier, and Knights never puts up a frickin' fight when it comes to getting captured. Like, Knights is the most incompetent person when it comes to, like, fighting back, and I don't know why that is either, because Knights is supposed to be way stronger than this. But then it doesn't matter, because all the kid has to do is climb in the hole in the bottom of the cage to duelize with Knights and take the keys back that are right there. Look, Reala's an idiot. That's all I'm trying to stress here. I can't overemphasize that enough. Why Wiseman keeps him around? I do not know. Because the only time Wiseman comes close to success is when he literally does it himself, and he almost wins. So it is abundantly clear that just like most evil villains, Wiseman can depend on nobody but himself. And to be honest, I know that feel. I get that, all right? Anyway, I mentioned the kids being banished. All right, so there's another major problem with this game that I hate when it comes to the gameplay. They really mixed up the game when it comes to the mechanics. Like, you're looking at it and say it looks like Knights, and sometimes it is. Other times you're doing these weird, like, little mini games that involve, like, moving bubbles around and stuff. Some of them are fun, some of them are not. It just kind of depends, but I like the idea of breaking up the gameplay in different ways. Even if they don't all work out, it's still a good idea to mix it up. What wasn't a good idea was making entire levels where you do nothing but play as the children in weird puzzle platforming segments. That doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world, but the problem with these segments is that they are not programmed in a way that I would concede as being fun. Ever. The kids are slow, clunky, and not enjoyable to play as in the slightest. These levels take the longest out of any other levels in the game, and they grind what would be a relatively, well, incompetent but flowing narrative to a screeching halt for no reason other than to pad this game out and make it longer. There's already a glorious amount of padding in this game to try to make it feel longer, but these levels in particular are the worst at that. The only thing I'll say is that for some reason, Will, the male character, only plays one of those levels once, whereas poor Helen got 3 of them for some reason, I don't know why. Will had more fun, weird mini-games like Knights turning into a roller coaster or a raft, which Helen didn't get hardly at all. Also, there's this other auxiliary character named Owl. He's an owl. He does tutorial stuff, which reminds me of another owl that nobody wants to talk about because he won't let you go. And Owl drives me crazy because Owl's existence tells me that there's no reason why knights had to speak. Because if Al is talking and explaining the story, and explaining the tutorial, then knights doesn't have to talk at all. You could have had Al do all the dialogue bits if you had to do it that way. But that's not what you did. You had knights speak. Not because you wanted to give knights any more character, just because you wanted to have knights speak. Because that was really important to you. I'm not gonna get past that. Knights shouldn't be talking. It's not necessary. It actually makes the game worse somehow. I need to get back to the story because when it comes to the kids specifically, Will and Helen, alright, each of them is having an issue with their respective parent. Alright, so Helen has issues with her mom because her mother and her play the violin together, but Helen doesn't think she's ever going to be good enough to be able to play with her mother, and she's worried about letting her down. Will has kind of the opposite problem where he has no doubt in his soccer skills, but he's afraid his dad doesn't really care or acknowledge it because his dad's always going away on business trips. It's affecting both of them. It's also fair to mention that Will and Helen are also much younger than Elliot and Clarice were. At least they certainly look like it. So I can understand why having, issues with parents might be more relevant to younger kids. Now, none of that sounds bad so far because it sounds like a decent tale to tell through, a Nights style story, because the idea of Nights into Dreams is that both Elliot and Clarice were able to act out and get through their real life issues by saving the dream world, but also going through nightmares that were traumatizing them in real life and overcoming that. The problem with Will and Helen's real life issues is that at no point do any of their issues come into play during this whole dream sequence situation. Like, at no time. The bosses in this game are in no way representative of any kind of issues these kids could possibly have. While the gameplay involving the bosses is very, very creative, I'll acknowledge that, their actual designs don't seem to be influenced by anything that could be affecting these kids. In addition, since you're having Nights talk, and I'll talk, and the kids talk, one would think that at some point they should talk about their problems. Like, if you're gonna have Nights speak, at least have Nights be some kind of bearer of reason, or try to help the kids overcome their problems by encouraging them, or something. But at no time do Will or Helen mention their issues to Nights, or Al, or to each other. In fact, even when they both have the issue of questioning their trust in Nights, when they respectively find out that Nights is actually a nightmare, they don't talk about that either. They just say, well, you should always trust your friends. And that's about it. They don't mention anything specific. Nothing about the story in the dreams seems to relate to their issues in real life at all. And at least in Into Dreams, where you could argue that my interpretations of the bosses were just thinking about it too much, the point was that I could look at that and try to interpret how this was influencing the characters involved. But in Will and Helen's case, because they're talking, I know for a fact that nothing that is going on in this game has anything to do with their respective parental issues. So why is it a factor at all? I seriously think this game would be better if you ripped out like all the cutscenes. No, seriously. If these characters never spoke and never interacted and we just went from level to level, it honestly would be better, because at least then I could mentally fill in the gaps to try to figure out exactly what was going on, because it's back to the player's interpretation. It literally would be much better if you let the player fill in the gaps, because then you get a coherent story out of it, because the player can think of a much better logical narrative than the developers actually presented to us. And the worst part is I can't even get mad at the developers. Like, I can't do that. Do you want to know why? Because, so, I saw this game announced in Game Informer. I know, I'm taking everybody back. Back in the day, there were these things called gaming magazines. Before, like, really usable internet, well, usable internet was around at that time, gaming magazines died a slow, painful death, whatever. The point is, I didn't do a lot of research online back when this game was released, okay? I honestly didn't. I was big time into internet forums, but other than that, like, You know, I didn't really frequent any of the major gaming journalistic sites or whatever. So I got all my news from Game Informer. Well, Game Informer announced it. And the person who wrote that Game Informer article specifically pointed this out. They had concerns over this game because it was announced in like December, January, and the release date was set for the summer. And they were like, you know, it seems like they only have 6 months to finish this game. I'm not sure that's enough time. Therefore, the game was in an unfinished state with only 6 months between the release date, which means it couldn't have had more than a year of dev time, and that's being generous. That can't be a developer decision. That had to be Sega doing their thing again, where they're like, all right, we're gonna approve and fund this project. Also, you will have not nearly enough time to actually finish that project. And do you have any idea how many friggin' times Sega has pulled that crap? Why are you like this? Look, if you want to make good games, you have to give the developers time to actually, like, make them. You can't expect perfection in a short amount of time because everything feels rushed. And honestly, considering how much time they had to work with this, I think the game turned out pretty good. All things considered, like with that much dev time, it should be way worse. Like, because there's a lot to like in the game. The core mechanics work. There are a lot of nice references back to the original game. The final boss fight with Wiseman is both horrifying and beautiful. People cared. Like, I can look at this game and say the people actually developing the game really cared, that they just weren't given enough time to make the game. And you know, it bothers me. It just really bothers me. And I'm still on the story. I know I keep skipping around with that, but there's just so much crap with the story that's driving me crazy. Like, I don't think this game really knew what the idea we're supposed to represent, because I thought, as I read the synopsis from the first game, every single dreamer has the 5 idea when they show up. And the reason why Elliot and Clara still had their ideas of courage was because that's the one Wiseman couldn't take, because NiGHTS was the one who was supposed to take it. Now, in this game, Will and Helen seem to be exceptions when it comes to the ideas of courage. Like, Al is like, I don't know how you still have that. Every other dreamer's lost it. But that should be impossible because of the reason why Wiseman couldn't take it in the first place. Like, you can't, you're crossing wires here. Like, it's either one or the other. You can't just retcon that. I mean, you can, and it did, but then it's getting even weirder because even within its own game universe, it doesn't seem to know what the ideas are. Because in Helen's story, Al talks about the idea as if there's like only 5 of them and they make up the entire, you know, scope of NiGHTopia. Also, he doesn't call it NiGHTopia, he calls it the Night Dimension, and it makes me mad because he still calls the residents NiGHTopians. Al seems to think in Helen's story there's only like 5 idea that don't like belong directly to Helen, but are just like representative of how the entire dimension works or whatever, and she has to get them back because somehow she has the one of courage. But in Will's story, it's closer to the original lore where it's Will's idea specifically, and the game doesn't seem to know which canon they're going with, whether the actual original canon or something new, which tells me that they didn't know what they were doing. Also, when I bring this up, it really, there are parts of this game that write as if this was supposed to be some kind of, you know, soft reboot or something, or even a remake, but it's abundantly clear by NiGHTS' reactions to Wiseman that this can't be, because the original game still happened. So either it's a sequel or it's not. And I don't know if you had enough time to make up your minds, but you can't have both. Oh yeah, there's also like a NiGHTopian Chow Garden, where like, it's like the Sonic Adventure 2 Chow Garden, except it's NiGHTopians. It's nice that they were trying to introduce the kind of Chow Garden mechanics, except of course here it's not anywhere near that good, though they tried to introduce online with this, where you can share and visit each other's gardens, and I just love that they took the time to add something like that, which is completely unnecessary, into the NiGHTS game, yet have not even remotely attempted to do that in any of the Sonic games since SA2, even though That's one of the best things about SA2, was the Chow Garden. Like, everyone loved it. Why would you do it here but not in the actual, what? And you're using it to exploit the Wii's online? You know what console we're talking about, right? Let's be fair, when it comes to online, the Wii really wasn't very good. I mean, there were a few you could play online and it worked, but it was never as optimized as either the PS3 or the 360. I mean, Nintendo's gotten better recently, but back then it was just gross. But you're gonna take development time to make something that's completely unnecessary rather than maximizing and fixing the, shall I say, the motion control that I can't stress enough doesn't work. It's just a disappointing experience. You know, you look at it and like, I want to like it. I want to love it. I want NiGHTS as a series to be untouched by imperfections, and yet they released a half-baked, pseudo-sequel that doesn't even function in the way that it should. And it sucks because you could tell the people behind it cared. The actual devs, when it comes to certain things like, the music and everything and trying to get the mechanics right, at least when it comes to the non-motion control related stuff, like, they were trying really hard, they just weren't given enough time. And because of that, we'll probably never see another NiGHTS game ever again. Much like we'll never see another Echo game ever again. Or a Vector Man game ever again. There's a lot of things I'm never gonna see ever again. Unless, of course, I'm actually in that coma and all these things came to fruition in the real world and all of you are in my head. This whole thing is in my head. It's the only logical explanation. That or I need to get more sleep. Probably the second one, because I need to stop psyching myself out. I'm gonna go bye.